Cougar Boys, a necessity for gracious living. For the last few years, I've been searching high and low to fill a void in my life. I've tried looking around my local area, travelling the world and searching online, but no matter how much time I put in, I can't find my Cougar Boy anywhere. So the hunt is still on as I continue my quest for this elusive catch. Maybe all this time I have simply been looking in the wrong places. As many have told me, the best Cougar Boys are all found in Brazil. But with all of this said, this probably raises the question, why would a woman like me need a Cougar Boy so badly, when they have far from the greatest of reputations? Well, let me try and answer that question today. I am Lady Decade, and this is why I am looking for a Cougar Boy. Cheers. Who doesn't love fun, right? Tracking down a Cougar Boy feels exactly like what I need right now. However, I'll have to settle for the next best thing, even if it isn't quite as exotic as the goodness that I seek. I am referring to a chunky, thick battery-powered device that has provided lonely individuals with hours upon hours of passionate fun for decades, no pun intended, because you know, my name is Lady Decade. I know some of you are a bit slow sometimes. Anyway, I'm referring to everyone's favourite pleasurable stimulation toy named after an animal. The Mega Duck. What? You thought I was talking about something else? Get your mind out of the gutter! The Mega Duck, also known as the Mega Duck WG101, is a naughty handheld device created to satisfy the urges of those who didn't want to pay for a more premium entertainment experience. And when I say premium, I use such a term very lightly, as I'm only talking about the Nintendo Game Boy. The Nintendo Game Boy, released in 1989, would quickly become the world's most popular gaming device, dwarfing the success of all its competition, even though a strong case could be made that it was amongst the most basic handhelds around. The Atari Lynx, Sega Game Gear and PC Engine GT offered better graphics, full colour displays and backlights, making the gameplay easy to see. The Game Boy, though, would successfully murder all of its competition through a combination of a strong dedicated handheld gaming library and superior battery life. Still, perhaps most importantly, is its cheap price point. The Game Boy was one of the most affordable handhelds, making it more justifiable for consumers to fork out money for the Tetris playing machine. So, if the Game Boy was the budget handheld, then what was the Mega Duck? Essentially, Hong Kong-based Wellback Holdings, through its Timlex International division, thought to themselves, well, people love the Game Boy because it's cheap. Let's knock out an even cheaper cartridge-based handheld, and the budget market will be ours. What makes this crazy endeavour all the more insane is that Wellback Holdings would not be the only company trying to carve out a piece of the Game Boy's market share, as many others would do the same. Perhaps the most notable would be Watera with their Supervision platform, but that's a story for a different episode. As for the Mega Duck, first released in the Netherlands in 1993, it first went on sale at 129 Dutch guilders. The exchange rate at the time would have put the system on sale at the equivalent of $65, which was cheaper than the Game Boy at launch. The Game Boys launched at $90 in the US to give even more context. With electronics traditionally being more expensive in European countries, one can easily assume that the Game Boy would have been sold for far more in the Netherlands. 4 years into the system's life cycle, one has to assume the Game Boy's price in most places had likely come down somewhat. So, was $65 in 1993 worth it? For this? Let's discuss. To be fair to the Megaduck, it has a good ergonomic feel. It feels comfortable in one's hands, sturdy and well put together. Instantly, gamers will notice that it shares many similarities with the clear inspiration behind it, with the pair both featuring green monochrome LCD screens. The Megaduck features both B and A buttons and select and start buttons, with the Megaduck differing from the Game Boy in that the latter two buttons are placed just above the speaker. Unfortunately, though, the Megaduck does not feature a traditional D-pad, likely because Nintendo was fiercely protecting its patent on such a feature at the time. Instead, we get this alternative design that instead resembles 4 Tic Tacs. Speaking of buttons, they resemble delicious confectionaries. The A and B buttons look like Smarties. Either the designer was hungry when he conceptualized this thing, or I am very hungry right now.
A absolutely stupendous confectionery.
Like the Game Boy, the Megaduck also features an on-off switch in the same position and contrast and volume regulators for, contrast and volume regulation. These are found in the same places as on the Game Boy too, and the Megaduck even has an extension interface link allowing for 2-player games or an external joystick. Crazy. In Whirlback Holdings' quest to copy Nintendo, speakers and a headphone jack can also be found on a Megaduck in the same positions. The Megaduck takes 4 AA batteries, with reportedly a battery life lasting up to 15 hours. The company went all in with many ways of copying the Game Boy. But what about the chipset that is located within? The information superhighway states that the Megaduck features a multi-board design, separating the motherboard, LCD and controller PCB into 3 assemblies. You can read the Megaduck spec now if you are one of those weird tech perverts who are into this sort of thing. Like the Game Boy, a phrase I can't stop saying in this video, the Megaduck takes pocket-size cartridges. As you can see, these are slightly smaller than Game Boy cartridges, instead 36-pin ROM cartridges as opposed to the Game Boy's 32. Speaking of games, a systems library is often the key reason many people invest in gaming hardware. So, did the Megaduck deliver an awesome library of games that would wow its audience? Well, no, not really. Most of the systems library was developed by just one company, which tells you all you need to know regarding the support the Megaduck would receive from third parties. Most games with the hardware were developed by Thin Chen Enterprises under their Saken and Common brands. Like many companies we talk about on this channel, Thin Chen Enterprises were based out of Taiwan and would develop games for the NES, Mega Drive and Game Boy. Interestingly, all of their games released on such hardware were created without a license. However, their work on the Megaduck and the Watara supervision were performed in an official capacity. There's not much to be excited about on the Megaduck, but 4-in-1 cartridges featuring Electron World, Dice Block, Trouble Zone and Virus Attack are amongst its library. Armor Force is a slow-scrolling space shooter, try saying that after a few drinks, and Ant Soldier, which does its best Lemmings impression. Perhaps slightly more interestingly though, we have Arctic Zone, a strange puzzle game taking some influence from Tetris, where you play as a dancing bear. Wah wah wee wah, I love dancing bears, very nice. Bomb Disposer on the platform is another fun game, however you would hope it would be really, as it's just Dr. Mario in an alternative coat of paint. You gotta love Dr. Mario, and you gotta love Taiwan, they sure know how to clone.
Your clones are very impressive, you must be very proud.
Brick Wall, which features gameplay reminiscent of Arkanoid and Tetris, is notable for being the only game not created by Thin Chen Enterprises. Instead, made by Timlex International, it's no more impressive than anything else on the platform. Beast Fighters allow you to make your best Godzilla impression, but Common 5-in-1 contains perhaps the best game of the lot, a perfect Tetris clone. So, if you were looking for a Game Boy back in the day simply to play Tetris, then the Megaduck could have served your gaming needs perfectly. Captain Knack would serve as the platform's resident cute-em-up, and Magical Tower is a video game that doesn't really have anything wrong with it. One can say it provides a decent hand. Pile Wonder is a fine tile-pushing game, and we have a great Bomberman clone in the form of Puppet Knight. Worm Visit does an awesome job of ripping off Frogger, and if you like playing with balls...
Stop it! Don't look at me like that!
Then, Zip Ball is a fun little puzzle game. Now, that about rounds up the sort of games you can find on the Megaduck, but before we move on, we have to mention the most famous title in the Megaduck's library. Snake Roy. The box art alone for this one is absolutely epic. I mean, what is even going on here? We have a king wearing a crown in front of a castle with the body of a super obese snake. And that's without mentioning that the castle is burning down and a sinister figure looks on with a trident. So what the actual on earth is this game? Well, being from Taiwan, it is yet another clone, basically. In this game's instance, it's a decent centipede clone, just like Snake on Nokia phones, which would surface a few years later in 1997. If you can remember that period, you will know how addictive that game was. In fact, it became a part of the fabric of mainstream culture as we knew it. So, as you can probably imagine, Snake Roy is among the better games to play on the Megaduck. Paired with its meme-worthy name and box art, once you hear about it, you won't forget about it. Bearing this in mind, is the Megaduck worth tracking down for its games? Well, of course not. The best you really get from this thing is decent clones of games that can already be found on the Game Boy. Then even many of those clones themselves were released by Thin Chen as unlicensed titles on the Game Boy anyway, so double the reason to not want the Megaduck for its games. The Megaduck, which is known to have been released in at least the Netherlands, France and Germany, is attractive today as it is a rare collector's piece that normies would laugh at you for owning, and an interesting example of a Hong Kong-based company trying to capitalise off the success of the Game Boy. So for now, I'll have to continue to make do with this stupid thing until I can finally get my hands around a lovely Cougar Boy from Brazil. Which reminds me, I should probably educate you on what a Cougar Boy actually is. You see, it wasn't just Europe who would be blessed with a handheld that features this handsome physic, but South America would also get one. In fact, these handhelds were marketed under various brands around the world. Creatronic and Videojet, for example. In fact, the Chinese-made Creatronic versions were distributed by a company called Cougar USA, also known as a Cougar Electronic Organization. Amusingly, the poor USA was deprived of these handhelds, but Brazil would get their fair share of them, carrying the amazing localized name of the Cougar Boy. God, I want a Cougar Boy. While Megaducks seem rare and tough to come by, tracking down a Cougar Boy seems even more difficult. This probably isn't helped because electronic trade tariffs between Brazil and most of the world are incredibly high, so most of the limited amount of existing Cougar Boys don't seem to make their way over here all that much. But do you know what is most frustrating about not owning a Cougar Boy of my very own? Just so happening to own the entire bloody Cougar Boy library, complete in box, this game library is as rare as rocking horse shit, and irritatingly, the console is not here to go with it to finish the collection. Just look at some of these absolute beauties. Even the iconic Snake Roy is here. Speaking of which, a complete in-box copy is even better, as if you look at the side of the box, they have botched the name, making this title even more memeable. Sankey Roy's an even dodgier name than Snake Roy. Fortunately, having no access to a Cougar Boy to call my own, there is one silver lining. Since the Megaduck and Cougar Boy are the same system, the whole Cougar Boy collection can be played on the Megaduck anyway. However, it is still very frustrating to not have a handheld branded Cougar Boy when this is the only complete in-box set of games in this entire games room. This is why I'm looking for a Cougar Boy. Well, that was all a bit weird, wasn't it? If you do like weird things like Megaducks, Cougar Boys or, well, me, then subscribe to this channel as you might take sick pleasure from my video on Super Mario Bros. Super Show the game.